Greetings, pilgrims. Welcome to a very special episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage. You may notice that the audio is a little different for today's episode because I'm using my phone. Because, yes, we have something super special here to talk about. But let's take a moment first, and I need to give you guys sincere thanks because we hit 5K subscribers. And, to be honest, you guys are so amazing that I couldn't even get this thing going before we're almost at 5,200 because you guys are that awesome. So thank you so much for all your kind support. So as a special thank you to you, I wanted to show you guys my first foray into 3D printing. So we made our logo, and I'm going to show you all the steps. So part of this video is going to be here on the cell phone camera, and then part of it will be in 3D here, and I'll try to either narrate or just record a separate piece. So I apologize, the audio might skip back and forth in quality a little bit. But for today, I want to show you my foray into 3D printing, talk about some of my lessons learned, what my experience was like, how I went about doing all of this in case you're interested. Because I know there's a lot of information out there about 3D printing, but there's not a whole lot of really good first-hand experience with how does it work and what are all the different things I need to consider and, that kind of thing. So I wanted to give you my experience. So I wanted to surprise you guys, and some of you will be and some of you won't because you're in on it. But, so to celebrate hitting 5K, I decided let's go ahead and print the logo because we got a pretty cool logo here. And I was worried about maybe it won't work as being printed in 3D because it's kind of freestanding and that kind of thing. But as you can see, it works out pretty nicely. So I'm going to talk about kind of how it all fits together here and some of my experience with the 3D printing process, and then I'll insert the part to the video where we jump over to the actual, recorded screen stuff, and I'll show you the modeling side of it as well. So first of all, I found a local company, and this whole project cost me $50. So one of the things nice about having a local company is you get a chance to really talk to the owner and negotiate with them. And I told him, hey, I've got 5,000 friends to tell all about this, right? So that helped too. And I was able to talk to him and really learn about the different types of materials. So this is an ABS plastic in case you're interested. And he mentioned that in order to sand this down, I can use anywhere from a 200 all the way up to a 1200 or 1500 grit to sand this down. It does sand similar to wood, and it does feel kind of like a plasticky wood. If you're familiar with board games like I am, some of the pieces are made in the same type of material. So it's a very familiar feel, physically. And it's pretty light. I can pick it up, no big deal. And it holds up nicely. This is not even, this is not put together yet. It's not glued. It's not been sanded down, anything. This is literally 10 minutes ago it came from the shop. So here we go. So as you can see, it has no back to it, just like the logo here. There's no back to it. And it's in 3 pieces. I apologize for a little bit of clattering here as I pull it apart. Let's try to not make too much noise for your faces. There we go. So it's in 3 pieces. And each piece was printed laying down like this because you have these holes. And I'll talk more about this in the 3D part of it, but we printed these face down. And then this piece here, again, apologize, I only got one hand here for the clattering. There we go. So this piece, as you can see, that hole there. So these guys were printed as twins, kind of like that, next to each other. And this piece was printed just like this. And you can tell that which side was top because you can tell by the bottom here. And you can see this little weird kind of spiky part, almost looks like a spiked ceiling, that kind of thing. Video game brain, of course. So the reason for that is when you have a piece like this, where how do you print this when you have to talk about something that is being built in layers from the ground up, right? So the best way that they found to do this is to print it face down like this, and then underneath it here, you're going to have all these little spikes are actually the remains of lots of tiny little pillars of plastic that were holding it up. They're supporting it. It's literally called support material. And what they do is they print it like this, and then they say, okay, based upon the design that Matt sent in, we know that we don't need those pillars, and that they were just there to support this, so they break them off. But as you can tell, it's not quite all the way there, so I'm going to have to do some sanding to get it to be nice and crisp, And for my purposes, that might not be necessary, but for your purposes, if you want it to be nice and crisp and clear, you definitely should. And then another thing to note is you see all these lines, which is pretty cool. This is how the material built up. And I'll try and show you a demo of this in 3D as well, but think of like a wafer cookie. So the way that this works is it's lots of crisscrossing lines that are then leveled up. And the spaces that you see get filled in with material as well. So that's why you see a little bit of that imperfection on the surface. And the reverse side of this is very shiny because the bottom, this was printed on top of glass. So this comes off of a glass surface here. That's why This part is perfectly smooth, which is why it picks up the light really well. But in order to get this to be perfect, what you would need to do is sand it down. You can put a primer on it, and then you can paint it the color you want. And I think this is a pretty close gray to what we have on our logo. And I'm pretty happy with it. I don't really think I'm going to do much more with it at the moment, but we might do some more. We'll see. But yeah, so if you want to make sure that this is going to be perfect, you're going to need to do some sanding and a little bit of post work to it. So that's no big deal. So once these were printed, pretty simple here, I had to do some very careful measurements, which we'll talk about in the 3D file. And then, now I can tell how they click together is quite simple. Because if I look at my logo there, and you line up the holes on the back of here. So for here, if this P is this way, well, it has to have a hole in the back, like that. Because that hole has to line up with this prong, like so. So that would go into there, like that. So then that just tells me, okay, well, this other one with this hole has to flip this way and be the other P, like that. And then they go like this together. So this would go here, like so. And then the top piece here is what actually joins the two together in the back. So very cool. So let's jump over to the 3D part and show you guys kind of how this works. But some final notes on the printing process. A couple of things that I noted during my journey to get this printed I wanted to mention really fast. One is do your research and make sure you know that the company you're working with is reputable, that they're not going to stiff you, that they're definitely going to give you what you want. And I spent a lot of time talking to this guy, and he was very forthcoming about the process and helped me understand from someone who is new to it. And when I walked in, my first impressions were this place is filthy, you know, thinking, oh man, but the positive to that is not that it's dirty, that they're dirty, right? It's that they do a lot of work. They do a lot of business. So there's machines running constantly in this place. And that's a good thing. That means people wouldn't come to a shop and keep giving them their business if it was bad. You know what I mean? So if you get a chance to really check out the business and make sure that they're going to spend the time to talk to you and make sure that you understand what you're getting. And they gave me plenty of examples, even a sample piece of plastic to understand what it's going to feel like. So that was really cool. And the guy even offered to reprint this for me because there are some slight imperfections in it. So if you look carefully at the edges here, these edges got a little messed up. Come on, focus camera. Right there on the edges. These edges got a little messed up. Oh, there you go. When the light catches, you can see the corners there. And I said, you know, that's fine. I'm not really worried about it. But he was very nice about saying, hey, you know, you can definitely get that redone if you want, or you can buff it out. You can even sand down to fix that. So he gave me some options. So definitely work with a company that you know you can trust and do your research for them and learn some things about the process. If you order stuff online, you know, you don't know until you get it. So if you have the option to go to a local shop, I highly recommend it because there's nothing quite like holding it in your hand and going, okay, this is really what I'm going to get. Because, I mean, it's going to be here on my desk, and I'm going to see it every day. I want to make sure it's something good. So, okay, enough jabbering. Let's jump over to the 3D part, and I'm going to show you that part now. All right, so here we are inside of Maya, and I want to show you the 3D file here and talk about how we came about creating this. So here is the three pieces, as we've seen before, and I've animated them to make this a little easier to explain so that they separate, so we can see the gaps here. So when I was speaking with the gentleman at the shop, he told me that the smallest possible gap you can have between here and say here, so when these come together like that, so this gap that is actually around them, he said is 0.35 millimeters, which is the smallest possible gap that they recommend to make something fit nicely. So which is why these are close to 0.4 millimeters in depth. So let me try and get a good view here for you. So right here, so this gap here, all the way around, boop, 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 is 0.4 millimeters. So make sure there's a little extra wiggle room. I didn't mind because we can always fill it with some epoxy or something. Not a big deal at all. So they all click together nicely. And if I take all of these, and I'm not sure if I have a material. I do not believe I do. So let's do foam. And let's take a look at the material here and see if we can't make it transparent. Foam 1, here we go, transparency. Let's up the transparency. There we go. So now you can kind of see better that this piece, as its little winglets come in here, you can see how far and how deep they go. So the back wall is right here, this line, and then they stop about here. So it's the same distance here as it is on the front. So the whole thing is uniform all the way around. So that's a little bit of extra wiggle room. Again, room for the glue, room for maybe an epoxy, whatever else you wanted to put in there to make sure that it will seat firmly. And I didn't go all the way to the wall because if you go all the way to this wall, if there's extra excess in the printing process, or if even just, something gets in there, it's not going to seat properly and they won't line up. And they don't physically line up quite the way you expect in the real world. Sitting here at my desk, let's move this back to full transparency. In the real world, sitting at my desk here, this piece actually sags down just a little bit, kind of like that. So it's not quite perfect because, again, I have to sand it, and I could put some epoxy in there, and I could even build it upside down on my desk to make sure that this surface and this surface and this surface would all match up to the desk. So imagine that it's now sitting upside down on the desk. And then if you put epoxy in there and let it harden, then when you put it back on the desk, it would be perfectly flat. So you could do that as well. Now, the interesting thing here is, again, you're working with scale. So scale is very important when you're modeling something physically. It's always important when you're modeling, but mostly very important when you're modeling physically. So to make sure that this whole thing would fit, I needed to first figure out where I'm going to print this thing at, and then how big is their maximum print bed. So this thing is only 4 inches high by 4 inches deep, so it's not too bad, and then 4 inches wide as well. So what we do here is, let's go up to our settings. I'm going to go to preferences. I'm going to go to settings here, and right now we're on centimeters because that's the default for Maya. So if I go in here and change this and say, let's do inches, and say save, there we go. Then if I make a new box, and now I'm going to say, hey, new box, I want you to be a certain size. So if I say 4 by 4 by 4, and 1 by 1 by 1, there we go. Actually, no, I think it's 6 by 6. Yeah, 4 by 4 was a little too small when I spoke to the guy on the phone, and he said, 6 by, we can do, I think they can do maximum of 8 by 8, but I chose 6 by 6 to say, that's fine. So there you go. You can see there. So now if I make it 6 by 6, then you see the whole thing will fit nicely. And again, this thing, maybe we can give this one a little bit of transparency, so you can see that this box. So I made sure that there's plenty of room inside there. I was not worried about making sure that it's all the way to the edges. That's not a concern of mine. But you need to make sure that the printing company knows how big your box is and how big it's going to fit inside here. And if it is precise, then you make sure that they understand that. Because I did note that when they get the file from me, these 3 pieces that came in, I had to take these pieces apart and actually lay them down. So I actually did the laying down that you saw in my demonstration there. So I actually put them on the floor like this, and then rotated this piece like this. I laid them out like that for them and sent it to them. When they get that file does not have any knowledge of really sizing. So I tell them, hey, I modeled it to fit within a 6 by 6 box. So they make a 6 by 6 box like this, and then say, okay, if I put this in the center of the world, now they can scale these things up. I think it was like a 3.8 something or other, scaling reference. But that's an important thing to know is your measurements. Make sure your measurements are good. Now, to actually physically model this, in case you're interested, it's really nothing special. It's nothing different from normal modeling, except that you have to make sure you're paying attention to scale. So when I modeled these things, I made sure to make them exactly certain sizes. I first modeled it the way I would normally model it. So I modeled this piece, this, and this without the winglets, and just made it float next to each other. So I just made them float like that. Then I said, okay, let's capture all of that, and as you can see, each piece, no matter what piece I select, the pivot never moves. The pivot is always centered to the world to make sure that all the pieces come back together in exactly the right place. This allowed me to do something like this. As I'm working, I can move this over here, and I just come over here and say, all right, I need to move some vertices around. I need to do something if I wanted to add a chamfer, whatever I want to do, and I don't have to worry about where I moved it to in the world. I can always just go 0, 0, 0, and it goes right back to where it needs to be. So that's another trick to make sure that all of your stuff is cohesive, because it needs to be when you print it. So after I modeled it and made sure that it looks like my logo, okay, check. Then I made the box because I knew it was going to be physically printed. And I said, okay, box, if you're in the middle of the world, then I just moved my logo to the middle and scaled it up until I was happy. I didn't need it to go all the way to the edge. Another consideration is, yes, it would have been nice to maybe have it be a little bit bigger, but I want something that's going to be for my desk. I don't really need something that is massive, really. And take into account, the larger the object that you print, the more material it is. That means the more it's going to cost. Now, I got away with a pretty simple print as far as it's essentially boxes. It's really easy to print. And the pieces really just have a few holes cut in them, so it's not really a big deal. And I chose a gray color because my logo happens to be gray. So those three things in conjunction gave me a pretty low price. You know, $50 is not bad at all to print something like this. Now, if you have a character and everything, you're going to have to design these little holes like this to put, you know, to plug the arms into and that kind of thing. Cover the seams if you can with maybe like a fold of clothing or hair that comes down the back or something like that, right? But just know that the more complex it is, that it's going to be harder to print. You're going to have more of those things like we have where we've got the support material underneath, so then I have to sand this down now. So all of those things will add up the more complex it is. But it was a ton of fun and definitely worth doing, and I'm really happy with the result. It looks awesome. I have something totally custom that is of my design that is thanks to you guys, you know, to allow me to do this. And so it was just too much fun. So thank you again, guys, for watching, for being a part of the pilgrimage. We've got so much coming up. I know a lot of you guys have joined recently to celebrate and to be part of the Battle Royale series, and that's going very well. We're almost done, sad to say. But when we're done with that, don't worry, there's a ton more. I counted the other day, and there are 87 items on the to-do list, okay? So bear with me when I don't get back to you right away. I'm trying so much, but there are over 5,000 of you now, which is just blows my mind. And really, I don't really make any money from YouTube for all of that, and I don't really care to. It's just a measure for me to say how many people are enjoying it, and as the number goes up, that tells me I'm doing good. If it starts going down, I try to reassess. So please tell me what you guys think. Please be a part of it. And, you know, we have the pilgrimage for the Discord. So over here, let's see if I can bring it over here and show you really quick. So the Discord here. So please be a part of the Discord. Come and tell me what you think. Be a part of the team and, you know, just share and collaborate with us. And if there's something that you think is missing, you know, politely join the Discord and tell me and be a part of the team. So thank you again, guys, for 5K. I really appreciate it so very much. Here's to 30K more. Let's just keep going. It's amazing. We've got so much coming up, including a few collaborative projects coming up and a really awesome step-by-step series coming up soon. And it's part of a secret project. So as soon as that's done, you guys are going to be let in on the secret, and I have a ton of videos coming your way. So thank you so much for joining me. And guys, as always, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.